Welcome to the Be Kind podcast with your host, Joe Kirkner, presented by the Animal Advocates of South Central Pennsylvania.
Welcome, everybody, to the Be Kind podcast, part of the Animal Advocates' mission to create a more compassionate world for all living creatures, whether they are plants, animals, single-celled, multi-celled, feed through ingesting foreign substances, or feed through absorbing sunlight. Everything is amazing and beautiful and deserves to be loved, and we are here to talk about the extent to which that love extends to non-animal beings. Correct me if I'm saying this wrong. I'm just totally winging it right here. We're talking about plants, I guess, is to be more simple. And we're here with Rahs and John again today. Hello, gang.
Hello. Hi. So actually, I should just go ahead and say this. You are our first guest that wasn't on the board in person doing the podcast with us. So that's pretty cool.
Making records.
Very exciting. Monumental moment in Be Kind history.
It only took us 60 episodes, but hey, here we are.
Well, that's what happens when you start a podcast right before a global pandemic.
True.
Yep.
So we're just being responsible. But now we got people here. We got a studio. We got headphones. We got lighting. We got a cat. We're official, everyone.
We got sweat.
That too. But I did turn the AC on for both of you. So
thank you.
I got that going.
That's nice. Thank you. Much appreciated.
So Rahs approached us asking if we could do an episode with her to talk about plants and the vegan movement. If you've been vegan long enough, you probably had the counter argument to it saying, well, what about plants? Do plants feel? What about them? We leave them out to dry. I had a moment where someone said, well, what about carrots? Can carrots feel pain? Can I eat carrots? And then usually we brushed off and just laugh, or most of the times you kind of laugh it off because it's usually in a setting where it's not really appropriate to get into that big kind of debate. Or most people, when they say that, are not, in my opinion, being super serious, or they're not really trying to have an ethical debate.
It's just an argument.
Yeah. It's just a gotcha vegan moment. And so I was interested in this when she approached us. So I did a little research, and I really collected my thoughts a bit, and she has some passionate views on this as well. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You have some
it's okay.
detailed views on this as well. And I'd be curious to see your thoughts on the whole, are vegans ethically obligated to consider the feelings and of plants as well? And do they feel pain? And what does that really mean for us as individuals living our day-to-day lives? So I rambled enough to start. So Rahs, I will pass the hypothetical mic over to you to let you kick us off and see where this conversation goes.
Well, thank you guys for having me here and having this conversation. I know, like you said, this is one that a lot of people that are not vegan bring it up, and they use it kind of, against you. Like, you are so heartless, you don't care about plants. Even though in the same sentence, you can also say then that, well, if you cared about plants, like animal agriculture uses so much more plants, like a cow eats so much more than what I consume. So if you were really concerned about the plants, then you would just go straight to the source rather than letting, a cow consume more than what you would in the first place. But that's kind of that argument and not really anything to do with plants. But I feel like maybe to start with this, we should maybe talk a little bit about botany with plants, because I feel like that would maybe help it make sense. The plants that we eat most commonly are ones that we eat the fruit of the plant to reproduce. And I don't mean fruit strictly in terms of like watermelons, apples, grapes. I mean the fruit of the plant, which is anything that a plant bears that encapsulates seeds for it to reproduce. So in order for these plants to reproduce and then propagate themselves, they create these parts that are meant to be eaten by animals, including humans, because we are animals. And then we help them spread their seeds and disperse themselves. So there are a lot of plants that are actually dependent upon people. They evolved with us and we help them grow. So without our help, they would no longer grow and they would kind of cease to exist. So it's a little bit of a mutually beneficial relationship that we have with a lot of these plants. The other part to that whether or not plants can feel pain or how they feel, is that there's a difference I think fundamentally between if you have a tree growing and you chop it down and then it's just left with a stump and you've killed that tree, versus if you're growing a tomato plant and it continues to grow for the season and you're picking the fruit off of it that is meant to be picked, that is beneficial to the plant, does that really hurt the plant? I don't really feel that that does. I feel like that's part of its life cycle. And there's also different ways you can trim a tree where it would be the same as trimming hair on a human or trimming nails on a human. There's a lot of pruning that is good for plants versus you don't have to just hack it down and kill it.
Right. I agree. And I'm a landscaper on the side, so like I know exactly what you're talking about. Like you have to like clip at a certain point or you can actually like damage it.
Right.
But yeah, it is good for them to do that.
Right.
So
It gets airflow. It helps from diseases spreading,
Yep.
bacteria, different things like that. But it depends on the plant. Different plants get treated differently. So you wouldn't treat an oak tree the same way that you would treat a yew bush, the same way that you would treat a tomato plant. Like they're
Right.
they're different.
right.
And I suppose we should also touch on the anatomy. Is anatomy the right word for plants?
Sure. Yeah.
The anatomy of plants, something that the typical counter-argument to the do plants feel pain question is that they do not have what we perceive as the right anatomy to have the sensation of
Brains. You're talking about
pain.
brains.
And there's all sorts of fancy words that I forgot what they are, but there's different nerve endings
like a central
and
nervous
things
system.
like that
Right,
and all that.
right.
So technically, as the pain we know, they can't feel. And that's where it gets sticky for me, is because I mentioned this in the bug episode, I think, is where humans are incredibly good at anthropomorphizing, where we see a bug or a fish and we think it's cute or happy or sad. And these are all human emotions that we
Right.
label and vary from person to person, let alone from species or kingdom or phylum or kids play chess, genuses and all that. So to say that a plant feels pain as we know, I think would be a stretch in any sense.
I don't think
of
it's
the word.
it's anything like what we feel. I don't think that it's not a parallel comparison. I definitely feel like it's different, but I still feel like it's there. Just because it's different doesn't mean that it's not valuable.
Right. I agree.
And that leads me to another point that I'm going to try and be coherent with this. So as you're talking about the tomato plants and harvesting them and the purpose of eating fruits and veggies, that's something I made a note too. I was doing some research where we're supposed to eat fruits and veggies.
Right.
As far as we know, they were grown, plants grow them so we can eat them, and they go back out into the world and become, well, we poop them out,
Right.
to be a little crass. And then
Right.
in a normal world where we're not pooping into metal porcelain bowls that are then piped through sewage systems into large vats, and then that's where my knowledge of modern plumbing ends. They would go into the ground, and then if the soil conditions were right, they would grow into another plant. That plant would grow fruits and veggies. Another
Correct,
Joe would come
yes.
around and eat that, and then he'd poop that out, and then the cycle continues for perpetuity.
Right.
But Ra, I don't know if you know this, but the plants that we eat now, those seeds essentially get destroyed. They don't get a chance to go back into the modern.
You mean the
The-
ones that like we consume because of indoor plumbing?
Yes.
Yes.
So
yes, yes.
the broccoli I just ate, those broccoli florets and seeds and stuff are not going
Well,
to
that
go
that
out.
broccoli you just ate was never going to come to anything. I mean, if you let that broccoli go to seed, you wouldn't want to eat it at that point. Broccoli is a little bit different than a fruit-bearing plant. Like they're different plants that we eat are grown for different things. Like some are grown for their leaves that we eat, some are grown for their roots that we eat. So like potatoes, beets, turnips, radishes, things like that. Those are the roots. And to get to those, yes, you do have to rip up the whole plant.
Yeah.
So the only way that you have to intentionally let that plant go and finish its life cycle, but then you are not eating that plant at that point. Once those plants go to flower and then fruit, they don't make edible fruit the way that we would think of it. So that's a little bit of a tricky.
So then if we were getting to simplify, but maybe broccoli was a poor example. So let's say I go back to my apple seed eating ways. So John, when I ate those apple seeds, I was just being evolutionarily consistent with the biological
You didn't
processes.
chew
of
them,
the
did
world.
you?
Oh,
I don't think so.
You just ate them whole.
I didn't intentionally chew them. I'm sure a chomp or two.
Well, you know,
hit
there's cyanide in apple seeds.
Yes, I've heard the speech from
No.
John.
If you swallow them whole, they stay encased, and then it's completely safe to eat them. It's just when you chew them in your mouth. And
Yes, I got the "How are you alive" speech from John earlier.
Oh, okay, good.
So I've since stopped eating apple seeds.
I was really worried about your health.
But let's say Joe 6 months ago, who was still on his apple seed eating ways, when I eat those apple seeds, there's no chance of them growing into apple trees.
I mean, they could. And I mean, you're getting into something else that if you want to get that specific, a lot of plants that we eat or food that we eat from the grocery store, a lot of those plants, like whether you cut into an apple or a bell pepper, that stuff is sterile. It's not going to grow into anything. Even if you don't eat it and you take the seeds out right away and you go and you plant it, that stuff is never going to grow. That's grown for patents, and that's grown for mega monoculture type, grow house, just that type of thing.
So from your point of view, is consumption of plants under that system, the monoculture factory, I guess factory farm's not there, industrial agriculture harvest of plants, is that an ethical practice in your opinion?
I feel like that's a whole nother podcast right there. But no, I also don't think that's sustainable either. I feel like that's better than animal agriculture. I feel like it creates less waste, less water usage, but it's also not sustainable. And that's part of swinging back to how I feel about plants. I feel like we need to have this biodiversity. We need to work with the plants. Like, the plants are not here for us. They were here a lot longer than we ever were as a species. And we share this world with other plants and animals. This is not our world, and everything is here for us. So we need to work with the plants. And I guess getting off on a tangent and coming back around to what you were asking, no, monoculture is not good. You don't have the insect life, you don't have the animal life. It's better to have the biodiversity.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there, and I completely agree. I want to also preface everything I'm saying with that. I think plants are amazing. They're super cool. Have you ever really looked at a tree and thought about it, or even a field of plants, or been out in the woods and looked at all the different plants and things? Well, it's crazy to think how all that works and how life has miraculously arranged itself to produce such diversity and beautifulness. I was sounding good there until I said the word beautifulness. Such beauty and majesty, and just the harmony that exists within the natural kingdom without us in it is mind-blowing. And I do agree that there is a certain, I'm going to sound a little spiritual when I say this, but there is a certain aura to plants and the living beings of them that enriches life. That's why people are always trying to get plants into the cities, green space, tell people to get out in the wilderness. It's because there is a certain energy that feeds off these plants that
I completely agree.
Makes life better.
And they're also kind of smart, quote unquote, because they can, if something is endangering them, they will send off
That's totally true. There are plants that, if they're being predated upon, if something is eating them, they can send out signals to the plants around them, and then they can also release chemicals like stinging nettles. When you pick them, they actually become more potent with their sting because they release more chemicals.
Right.
So animals don't eat them.
And they also, I can't remember the name of the chemical they release, but when it rains, that rain smell is actually like plants releasing a scent to let everyone, all the plants know that rain is coming. So I think that's just, plants in general are just incredible.
I think something that I found in my research too is we do have a habit, circling back around after we're circling around again to the beginning, where we do have a habit to anthropomorphize things, where you just said they're smart. And does that really, I don't think smart's really the right word.
Yeah, I couldn't think of anything better.
But intelligent. It's a different kind of intelligence than what we have. But
in all the research, I'm sorry, I mean to cut you off.
It's okay.
But all the research I've been doing, I call that a response to stimuli more than making a conscious decision. There's no, as you said, they don't have a brain with cognitive function to make the logical decision to release whatever scent.
Well, what about, let's go back to, we're in the woods and you have trees and you have old growth trees, the larger trees, and then you have when their seeds grow and their saplings. So they don't really receive any sunlight, but in order for them to be able to grow, they need to get the nutrients because plants eat the sun. So the larger mother trees that are around them release nutrients and I mean, that is a decision that they make. They don't have to do that. There's nothing in them that forces them to do that. They can be specific about what plants they share their nutrients with. And that is some form of intelligence. If you can be specific about what you're doing, what your actions are, that has to be some form of intelligence. Even though I feel like we don't quite fully grasp it yet, I feel like we don't have the technological research ability or even the desire, maybe even. Like, I don't know who gets grants for what nowadays, but I feel like this is still very new. Did you happen to see that research that I had posted on Facebook? John, I think you saw.
Yes.
Did you read the article about
I
it?
didn't get to read the whole thing, but it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, that was done about, just real quick about it, was just research was done where they were taking plants and they were putting them in conditions where it was putting them in stress. So some of them were, and I might be confusing more than one study here, but they were withholding them from water, and then they were seeing what was happening with these plants, and they were actually giving off sounds that they called it screaming, but it was not audible to the human ear, but they were able to detect this and doing things like cutting them down. That was an even louder cry for help from them.
Right. It was almost like some kind of like signature, like, or signal of some sort.
Right.
It was really interesting.
And different plants had different responses. Right.
I think part of the issue we're into with this kind of conversations, we don't even have the lexicon to really have an informed discussion. Because even
I feel
when you say
the lexicon is there, we just don't have it.
Well, we can only know so much, and despite what my herbology award at senior year of high school indicates, I am no expert on plants, though I do eat many of them, and so that's why this issue is very relevant to my personal way of living, and I'd imagine most vegans. And even when you say intelligence or smart or screaming, those are all, we're anthropomorphizing all these actions.
Right.
And even making a decision, that's something when we say make a decision, that's something you weigh the pros and cons and you think in your head and you
but
look at
how
your
do you
motive.
know that they don't do that, though?
Well, then you could use that debate for anything. That's what
true.
people always say.
But I mean, you could bring that back to certain animals, like, your bivalves. I mean, they don't really have brains. They don't really have
that's
anything.
Another podcast episode too.
Right, but I mean, how do you make that? Where do you draw that line in classification of what deserves respect and what doesn't? And for my thing, I'm not saying like let's not eat plants. Let's just stare at the sun all day and get our nutrients that way. I'm just saying that I feel like we should have more respect for plants and we should look at them in a different way. Like they're not just here, like we are here with them, not this is our world, and that sort of argument.
Yeah, I don't mean to indicate that you believe that we need to try and live off photosynthesis, and I never meant to imply, so I apologize if I was getting a little aggressive or defensive.
No.
And I only consume fair trade sunlight, so I'm very
fair trade organic.
Oof, sorry, I'm organic sunlight's too expensive.
Too much. Yeah, I hear that.
So I do agree that we need to live in a world where we do respect the value of plants, their uniqueness, and we don't just look at them as tools for our consumption, because that is where the root of most problems in modern society come from, is where we look at how can we consume this? What use is this to us? Whether it's this coffee mug, John, Victor, plants, the camera that I'm looking at right now, all these things are tools we're using for our lives. Very rarely do we see it as a selfless opportunity for us to contribute to the greater good of the universe. Whatever universe worldview you have for you. That could be religious, secular, what have you. But then my next kind of thing I'm thinking of is, who should we be targeting with this kind of philosophy or idealization? Because we live in a world where even the thought of not eating cheese, and you can live without cheese, is such a foreign concept, and people feel the need that they need meat. How many people do you talk to that said, I need my dead animal flesh in my life?
Yeah.
And then is this something that we target towards vegans, or already super vegans who already, don't have the red dyes, check the bread for a certain type of added vitamins, and make sure all their clothes are made ethically and from recycled products, and then we go to them with that message? Or who is this message for, I suppose, to keep it simple.
I mean, do you have to target someone? I think that's what's really nice about, for me, being vegan isn't like I'm not put into this box. I feel like this just aligns with my beliefs, and that's how I live my life. And if something aligns with your beliefs, that's how you can live your life. And it doesn't have to be like, I don't have to change your mind. We can sit here and we can have different opinions about it, but we can both agree on like, we're both vegan and we both use that term.
I agree with that. I think that is a great indication of the vegan movement, how it does have this flexibility, and we don't need to always be pushing a message. It's just the way you can live your life. But I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Mm-hmm. Some vegans argue that it is your ethical responsibility to push that vegan belief onto people, because if you don't, animals die. And does that translate over to your plant idea?
I get what you're saying, but I feel like that's going to push some people. Like, I am not that person. I am not a pushy person in any, I mean, this is hard enough for me to come here and sit and talk with you guys. So for me to try to walk up to somebody, and I'm also what I like to refer to as a closet vegan. Unless you like really know me, you don't know. Like, I don't start off with, hi, my name is Ra and I'm vegan. Like, let me talk to you about how horrible the animal agriculture industry is. I mean, I don't lead with that at all. So for me, I don't think that I don't want to push anybody to do anything. Like, if I lead by example and you're interested and you want to talk to me about it, cool. Like, I can talk to you all day about it, especially if you want to talk about plants. We can talk about plants. We can talk about herbs. I can tell you which ones are edible, that kind of thing. But I'm not the kind of person to push it at all. So that is just a non-thing for me personally.
And yeah, I was just playing devil advocate. I agree with you. I don't think that when you make veganism a way of life that you need to be confrontational at all times with people and make it super public and put yourself out there every opportunity. That is not an attractive lifestyle to try and get the masses to do.
Yeah.
So
I don't think anybody has ever been like, I saw this guy on the street and he was yelling at everybody, or, in a Burger King, he was saying meat is murder. And I just decided that was going to be it. I was just not like, I've never heard anybody say that that's how they even started their vegan journey. I hear people, talk about that guy with lots of, not nice words, but it's never a positive thing that I hear. But then again, I might not have my ear to the ground in the right places to.
Well, we've had 60 episodes now, and not one person has said, I went vegan because someone yelled at me in a Burger King.
Right.
It's always, I knew this person, they were vegan, really cool, and then I decided to try it, and now I've been vegan forever. That's how 99% of the time it goes.
Yep.
So if I'm just going to come up with some other common responses to this objection that people have when someone asks you if plants feel pain, some other things you can say is, well, yes, they do feel pain. Well, after the discussion, you've swayed me more to your side of thinking, so I very much appreciate having on the show and giving me a more nuanced view of the world and the organisms living in it. But if someone does come to me and say, do plants feel pain? I can now say, plants do have certain feelings and characteristics that we as a society do not recognize or even understand. And I personally do not have the knowledge to fully comprehend. And I acknowledge that there are certain things out of them that I don't understand. So they could very well feel some version of pain and suffering that we cannot, within our human minds, understand, comprehend, or even explain. But if they did, we still need more plants to consume animal flesh than if we just ate the plants alone.
Right.
So even if that is your worldview where plants do feel pain, they do have suffering as we know it, and every time you cut a flower, it's screaming, or I didn't mean to be condescending with that. That was just trying to have emphasis on there. But even if you do believe that plants suffer immensely every time you cause them physical harm, that's still far more physical harm happening when you consume dead animals than if you just consume the plants themselves. So when I play my game of what's the alternative, anytime I fall into an ethical situation, if the alternative of not eating plants is eating animals, that's actually worse. So you should probably just stick with eating plants.
Right.
Am I making sense?
Yep, it makes perfect sense to me.
And then Jainism, actually, John, we touched on this in one of our episodes.
We did.
Which is individuals who don't cause any suffering that can possibly stop something, or they only eat parts of plants that do not cause the death of the original plant.
Right.
My senior year herbology teacher is rolling over. Hopefully she's not dead. Is rolling over in her bed right now. Because I forget all the plants that's the thing with.
Well, I mean, there's lots of plants that we can consume without actually killing them. And one is beets, even though we traditionally eat the beet root, by pulling it out by the root, that would kill the whole plant. And then we don't have any more of that unless we do have some that we save and we let go to seed and replant those seeds. But the beets themselves, we can pick the leaves and then it regrows the leaves and it can continue on within its own life cycle. I mean, some plants, they live for one season and then they flower, they fruit, and they die. Some plants, they live to be hundreds of years old, like a lot of trees, like the redwood trees out in California. They are hundreds of years old, and they are going to continue to live on unless something happens, like people cut them down or the climate significantly changes against their favor, although they're probably, because of their size and age, a lot more adaptable than smaller trees, or things like an oak tree. To get acorns from it, you don't cut down the whole tree to get the acorn at the top, or even the apple. You don't cut down the whole tree to get the apple from the top. So these are plants that are allowed to continue to live on and on and on. And from their point of view, they are reproducing. That's how they are made to reproduce, and they don't know that the people that pick the fruit are going, and then their poop is going into this sewer system, and it's not going to ever, I mean, eventually it does go back. I heard somebody that worked for the sewer system out by Peach Bottom, and that along the banks, I guess you would call it there, that there's all kinds of tomato plants that just grow wild there. I don't know. I haven't seen this with my own eyes, but this is what I have heard. So, I mean, it is possible that seeds can go through that. To go off on a little bit more of a tangent here is that I know when I grew hot chili peppers in my garden and I picked those peppers, and to turn them into hot sauce, to process them, you have to boil them, cook them with vinegar, blend them, strain them, and even after all that, when I put, those are called the dregs then, it's still the seeds and a little bit of the pepper. I put that in my fridge, and these seeds still sprouted. They still had that will to live. And I just think that's really cool to look at plants and be like, wow, you really want to grow. You really want to be alive. And I feel like even though that's not maybe the same as what we would traditionally think of if we look at a pig going to slaughter and say, wow, they have that will to survive, or cows that kind of fight before they're going before the stun gun, and we say, wow, they have that will to survive. It's not the same in terms of exactly the same, but it's the same in terms of it's still there, if that makes sense. I guess I don't really have the words for it to exactly say what I mean, but I feel like it's still there even though it's different.
I think you're doing an amazing job, and you have said so many great things, and the theme I keep coming back to is the world is such a crazy, beautiful, amazing, complex place, and we humans have such a narrow frame of reference for so many things, and there's so much out there that we don't understand, that the smartest people in the world don't understand. So to try and reduce things down to simple ideas that we common people have in our heads is just going to be an exercise in frustration, and really don't do justice to the amazing, beautiful things going out there. So when in doubt, just give everything your most respect you possibly can, because you never know what's going to be out there, what feels, what doesn't, how it reacts, how it interacts with the world, and the ripple effects that compassion and love can spread towards all living creatures, whether it's a plant, a pig, a bug, a fish. The end. Just kidding. So I've loved this discussion. It really has helped me come to terms with some of the things I've been thinking of. Well, I don't want to have the last word, so I want to ask an open-ended question. Favorite fruit or vegetable? Well, favorite fruit and vegetable. Mine would be, I was going to say mushrooms, but that's a fungus. So I will go back to my good friend broccoli and apples.
We didn't even touch on fungus. I mean, that's a whole another kingdom. And we didn't even touch on how plants interact with fungus. And that's like an hour's discussion.
Well, I'm going to do some research, and we'll have you back on the show.
We'll definitely do a part 2 with that, because that'll be cool.
Yeah, favorite fruit and vegetable. That's really hard, because basically all I eat is fruit and vegetables. And I can't imagine picking just one. I feel like if I say one, then somebody else is going to be mad at me. And I have an affinity for herbs and wild plants that wouldn't really even fall. I mean, I love burdock and dandelions and my hoary skullcap. It's one of my favorite plants. So I can't do the fruit and vegetable. I'm sorry. I'm a letdown.
Well, Big Broccoli is a sponsor of our podcast. So I had to...
Well, then big shout out to broccoli. Yes, I want to thank you.
The greatest vegetable in the world. Yeah. Get your broccoli today. Well, John, can you try and narrow it down?
Oh, man. Brussels sprouts. I love Brussels sprouts. I eat them a lot.
Yeah.
I really love them. I really love orange. Oh man, that's a tough one. It really. I love strawberries. I love oranges. Oranges is probably my favorite. I guess I'll go with oranges. But yeah, I just I'm just like you. I eat lots of plants and vegetables and fruit. So
this isn't fair because you had time to think about this.
This is true.
But yeah, yeah, Brussels sprouts definitely. I probably eat those more than anything.
Which is a cousin to broccoli. So
Yes,
another shout out to broccoli. Thank you. Yeah.
All goes to the same vegetable fund.
well, yeah. I mean, anything that's in the brassica family, it technically has the same scientific name, so it's all kind of the same, you know.
She's clearly much smarter than us.
Way smarter.
So I want to give you the last word, Rob. If somebody's listening and they had a good time hearing this discussion and think, you know what, she's onto something. This whole plants are more complex than given credit for idea. But what do I do now?
I really advocate for people to do their own research and come to their own conclusions. And I'm totally open to talk about this. If somebody wants to just sit and chit chat for an hour, you know, that's fine. But I think definitely doing your own research and seeing what's out there, seeing what the scientific studies are. And if there's stuff out there that it's just not satisfying you, then, you know, reach out to people that are in your field, use your own abilities and skills and do your own research and, you know, apply for that grant and find things out, find out how do plants work? How do plants feel? And then, you know, get the answers for us.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show. It's
Thanks
been
for
so much
having me.
fun.
Yeah, thank you.
And if anyone listening wants to chime in with their thoughts on plants and feelings or call us out for something we said that was totally not true or say, Joe, you're completely wrong or did you think about this? Just email us at bekindpodcast@gmail.com and we'd be more than happy to talk and learn a little bit more and even have you on the show to talk some more about plants and things because as I'm sure we've both come to or all three of us have come to terms with this discussion, is we could go on for days and days, and this is a rabbit hole very worth diving down. I'm sure we'll have much more complex discussions in the future. But thank you, Ra, again for being on. It's been so much fun.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Be Kind podcast, presented by the Animal Advocates of South Central Pennsylvania.